Hello friends, welcome to part one of our Wayne Thiebaud inspired cupcake drawings. We are going to need for this part a pencil with an eraser at the end. You're also going to want some paper towel, some oil pastels, as well as a nice thick heavy piece of paper. White paper works best, and you want it to be sort of heavy because in part two, when we add the frosting, it's going to be quite heavy and thick, and we are going to want something a little bit sturdy to hold it up on. So anything like tag board, poster paper, watercolor paper, mixed media paper, anything that's a little thicker is going to work just great. So here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be creating some bottoms of our cupcakes, so just the wrapper parts. We're going to be drawing them out on the page, and we're going to try to spread them apart. Now it's up to you how many cupcakes you put in your drawing. I always like odd numbers. I think they look interesting and fun. So I'm going to do about 3 cupcakes across in a row. If I want to do a couple extra, or if you want to do a couple extra, feel free to do that. So what we're trying to do is make our cupcakes look a lot like this container. The bottom of the cupcake is very similar shape to the bottom of this container here. And what you'll notice is that the top of the container doesn't really look round from this angle. It does when we look at it straight down. We know it's a round container, but when you see it sitting on a table, it's going to look much like this, where the top actually looks like an oval shape rather than a round shape. The sides are angled instead of being perfectly straight, and the bottom is a curve instead of it being a straight across line. So those are some of the features that we're going to try to copy onto our drawing to make our cupcake wrappers look a little bit more realistic. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is draw a cupcake near the edge of our paper. I'm doing it near the edge so I have room to fit one in the middle and one on the end. If you've decided you're going to put some down low or some higher, you might create a different arrangement than I am. But I'm going to start over on the side here. And I'm going to start by putting an oval shape to illustrate the top of my cupcake. This is where the cake would be coming out of, and down here is where we're going to be drawing for the wrapper. Let's get a little bit closer so we can get a better look. Okay, so here's our oval. Now I'm going to be drawing the sides of the cupcake. Remember, I don't want to go straight down. I want to actually do it a little bit at an angle, so it's slightly diagonal. I'm going to repeat that on the other side. And rather than drawing a line that's straight across, we want to copy that shape that we saw in that cup. So we're going to do it a little bit of a curve at the bottom instead. Now, a couple other things that we're missing that would make this look more like a cupcake wrapper is the texture on the side. Every cupcake has some texture on the sides of it. So what I'm going to be doing is drawing a line from the top to the bottom, all the way across, trying to keep the space a little bit even throughout. Lastly, the top of a cupcake is always ruffled, not straight. So I'm going to erase the straight line, and I'm going to replace it with a nice ruffled line instead, a wavy line. The very last step we're going to add before we complete the rest of our cupcakes is we want to create a shadow, because we're going to be creating a light source when we color, and we want to have a shadow that's cast on the side. So here's how we're going to do it. Look at the vertical side of one side of your cupcake and draw a little line about in the middle. Now do the same at the bottom. So from one end to the other, find about the middle and make another little dash. What we're going to do now is connect this to this with a curved line, an oval sort of shape. So that way, the shadow will not be kind of a random blob, but it'll have a nice shape to it. Okay friends, let's add a few more cupcakes to finish this up. We're going to speed right through it. Here we go. Okay friends, I have my 3 cupcakes drawn with their 3 cast shadows. If you wanted to add more cupcakes, feel free to add 1 or 2 more at the bottom. I would not recommend adding too many at the top. The reason is we're going to be adding frosting to our cupcake. We want to make sure there's plenty of room above the cupcake to add our frosting. If you make your cupcake too close to the edge, then you're going to not have any more room for the frosting. So let's try to make sure we have plenty of room left. Now it's time to add some color. We're going to be using oil pastels for this part. The reason why we're using oil pastels is oil pastels are very thick and they smear quite nicely. And we're going to want a little smearing in order to do our shadows. In addition, you can layer on top of one another quite easily and have them show up really nicely. So let's get started. In the spirit of Wayne Thiebaud and his color usage for his cupcakes, we are going to be layering some colors on top of each other. So choose a color that you would like to use for your first cupcake wrapper, and you're going to add color to it. Let's zoom in. Okay, so here I am going to be coloring with my oil pastel that I've chosen, and I'm trying to color very neatly and evenly, filling up the whole wrapper space with a nice solid shade of color. Once I filled it in completely with the one shade I want, I'm going to take a second shade and put it on top of this color, but only in stripe form, right on top of the stripes where the textures are. Try to pick a color that's either very different or different enough that it'll still show up pretty well. I'm going with orange this time. Coloring right on top of the lines of the cupcake wrapper. If you want to add even more color, you can, but I think 2 colors looks really good. Let's add some color to our shadow. This is the part where you're going to need a little paper towel. So, shadows are not always just one color. Most people think of shadows as being black, and we are going to be using a little black, but we also want to use a little bit of an extra color. I would advise, though, that you stick with cool colors when you're working with shadows. So cool colors would be things like blue, green, and purple. Things that when you look at them, they give you a sense of coolness. I really would stay away from the things that are more like warm colors. Colors that are like the sun, red, orange, and yellow. Let's get started. So I'm going to start by taking my blue oil pastel actually, and I'm going to color in this shadow space with some blue. Next, I'm going to take a little bit of my black, and I'm going to put it specifically close to the outside edge and a little bit inwards, but I don't want to cover up the blue completely. I want to be able to see blue peeking through still. Lastly, I'm going to take a little bit of my black and just put a little stripe on the one side of the cupcake, the same side that has the shadow. Last step, we're going to take some paper towel and we're going to gently smudge the shadow on the side of the cupcake and then gently smudge the colors that are on the ground and allow them to blur out on the edge. Doing this allows our shadow to look a little more realistic, have a bit more of a fuzzy, soft pattern like a real shadow would. If you need to touch up anything or correct any things that are a little bit over smudged, feel free to go back in and redraw or recolor any of the details that you might need to do. And just like that, all 3 are done. So you might notice that I chose to make each one a different cupcake wrapper. So I have a green one, a purple one, and a yellow one with some nice colorful accents. You might choose to make all of yours different, or you might choose to do the same one different, or if you have more than 3, you might have more room for more variety. Or perhaps you wanted them all to be the same. It's really up to you. Okay guys, now we're ready for part 2, which is the frosting. Okay, we're ready for part 2 of our Wayne Thiebaud inspired cupcake drawing. And for this part, you're going to need your drawing of your cupcake wrappers. You're going to need a package of Model Magic. A 1 ounce package is plenty. In fact, you'll probably have some left over. White, preferably, but you could use other colors if you wanted. Some liquid glue, and then some markers. Preferably not permanent, so every other kind of marker will work for this. So let's get started. first things first, we are going to be taking our Model Magic out of the package. And Model Magic will dry out if you leave it out. So if you are not done working with it, or if you have extras and you want to save them, then you are going to want a Ziploc bag to put the rest of this Model Magic in. Model Magic is a lot like Play-Doh or modeling clay, but it's a good bit lighter. It's very lightweight, and it feels a little stiff at first, but once you work at it and pull it apart and push it together, the more you do this, the softer and more malleable or bendable it will become. So what you're going to need is you're going to need to take out a chunk for each cupcake that you have. You might find that you have extra, and that's great because you might want to also add something extra, like maybe sprinkles or cherries or other things that would be really cute to have on it. So I am taking 3 little lumps, and I'm leaving a little extra left over just so I have it in case I want to do some other colors or something with it, and I am ready to get started. Now, white frosting is going to be a little bit boring, so what we're going to do is add some color to it, and we're going to be using our markers for this part. So you can choose any color that you wish for your marker, and you're going to flatten out the piece of Model Magic that you have, and you're going to take the marker and color right on top of it. So I'm just zooming in so you guys can get a better look at what I'm doing. But after you color the surface, you're going to take your Model Magic with the ink on it, and you're going to start mixing and smushing it together so that the ink is mixing with the white, and it starts changing the color of the Model Magic into a really beautiful pastel color. Now, the more you do this, the more it's going to mix in, so you're going to get a nice solid color of whatever shade you were working on. You might get a little ink on your fingers, but if you're using washable markers, that should not be an issue. And if you want the color to be even more vibrant and darker, you're just going to repeat the process. So I'm going to flatten it out, add some more ink by either dotting it or spreading it out with my marker, and then I'm going to mix it again. And I'm just going to keep on repeating this process over and over and over again until I get the desired tone that I'm going for. One thing I will also say is that it's always better to go a little darker than a little lighter, because the colors can fade a little bit in the sunlight after time. So if you start with it a little darker, then it will often, when it dries down and as the sun or the light of the classroom or the home or wherever you are hits it, it will fade a little bit, but it'll still be pretty vibrant. So just keep repeating the process until you get the color that you want. So you're going to continue this process until you get the 3 colors that you want for your cupcakes. You want a good chunk of Model Magic to create a nice sort of large frosting space. Now, don't worry about shaping the frosting yet. We're going to do that in a minute, but just every so often kind of make sure you have enough that it's going to create a good size. If you're realizing you don't have quite enough, you can pull some of the extra scraps you may have left aside. But if you feel that you have enough, enjoy the tone, the color that you got, then you can set it aside and work on your next one. So let's get all of these done. Okay, here we are. We finished putting colors inside all of our little pieces of Model Magic. So I have a blue, a pink, a green, and did a little extra dollop of yellow just to use for maybe sprinkles or other things I might want to add as accents. And we're ready to turn these balls of colorful clay into the actual frosting. So let's zoom in and take a look at how we're going to make this happen. Okay, here we are up close looking at our cupcakes, and you can decide which color you want for each cupcake and just begin. So I'm going to take my blue and I'm going to roll it between my fingers and try to continue to roll it into a long sort of snake-like shape. And I'm going to keep on rolling it. There's lots of ways you could do the frosting, but this is my favorite way. So I'm going to roll it out. The skinnier, the better, because then I can really stack it up one on top of each other. And you're going to notice that the more you roll it out, the longer and longer and longer it's going to get. When you think you have a pretty good length, here's how we're going to do the frosting. You're going to start by laying the first strip from the end of the cupcake to the other end. And right where the cupcake ends, that's about when you're going to flip this over on itself. Flip it over so it connects to the other side, just like that. And that's layer 1. And now I'm going to put layer 2 on top, and then layer 3. And what can really be cool is if you keep going, have them get a little bit skinnier and smaller so they start creating a point at the top. So I'm going to layer again. This time not go all the way to the end, and I'm going to turn early, turn again, and keep on going until I get to the top. Now you'll see I have a good bit extra sticking off of it. I'm going to just tear it off and either let it curl up, because maybe I think that looks like a nice cute curly finish to the frosting, or I could tip it down, however you want to do it. You can make this even bigger and taller than I did. There is a lot left over, so if you wanted to really make this a big tall one, you could do that also. So that's one way you could do it. Another way is you could instead use maybe balls of it and flatten it out. And maybe you could use lots of different colors. Maybe the first row could be flattened out circles. Maybe the next row could be a different color. I'm going to continue with this color just to show you how you could be doing it. Here's another way you could layer them together. And another way to do frosting, besides the snake shape and besides using the circles that you layer and overlap and squish on top of each other, you could also take your piece of Model Magic, simply spread it out with your fingers, and place it on top of one of the cupcakes, pushing down, creating some lumps and bumps so it really looks like a fluffy bit of frosting on top of your cupcake. Once you're done with your frosting, however you choose to do it, or maybe you want to do a variety like I did, you can take any extra clay you have and use it to create some extra details, like maybe little bits of sprinkles, for example. Maybe you want to do cherry on top. There's lots of different ways you could put this together. One final thing to consider is maybe not just doing one color for your frosting, but actually using multiple colors. I explained that here by adding maybe other colors of circles, so it's not just the one color laid on top of each other. But another cool thing you can do is take your clay here and actually mix it with another color. So let me show you what that would look like. Taking a lump of one color and a lump of another color, and then starting to mix them together. You're going to want to start pushing and twisting, but you don't want to overdo it. If you do it too much, you're going to mix it completely, and then you won't have your two colors anymore. We want to mix just enough so we can still see both colors without mixing it completely and destroying all of that. So once I've mixed it a couple times like this, I'm now going to start rolling it out into my long snake shape, and you're going to see this really cool marbled effect inside of your Model Magic. And once you have that, you can repeat the layering process or do your circle process or whatever process you decided to do. All right, let's take a look at all of these zoomed out and completely finished. All right, here are my 3 cupcakes with their 3 completed frosting tops. I decided to do one of each technique. So in this one, I did the long snake with the marbled pattern in the Model Magic. This one, I just flattened out the piece and left it a little lumpy and bumpy. Added some sprinkles and a little cherry on top. If you wanted to take a marker and draw a little stem, you certainly could do that. And then for the last one, I did my circle technique where I just blopped down little bits of circles, but I layered different colors. I did 4 on the bottom, 3, then 2, then ended with 1. Now the very final step that you might want to do is, if they don't feel like they are sticking, so you notice that this easily comes off, to make sure that it sticks really well and stays on your paper, you're going to want to take a little bit of a liquid glue and just layer it on the back. Be careful not to over glue it, so notice that I just put a little bit all over and then put it in place. And don't touch it for a while. You want to make sure it really sets and doesn't fall off on you, gently patting it together. If they feel like they're stuck and they're not coming off, or part of them is stuck, instead of peeling the whole thing off, you could just put a little bit of dollops of glue, little dots, on the parts that are peeling up. And if it doesn't come off at all, you don't need to use any glue if you feel like it's going to stay put. Any pieces that you put on top should stay put quite nicely. If you have extra lumps of clay, you can either put them in a sandwich bag to save them for a later use, or you could turn them into something fun and let them air dry and keep them for yourself. I hope you guys had fun making these Wayne Thiebaud inspired cupcakes with me. I know I certainly did. I can't wait to see some of these beautiful cupcakes floating around the universe.